Welcome to the Joe Cortez Show here in Las Vegas, the entertainment capital of the world. And today we have none other than Bob Bennett, the Executive Director of the Nevada State Athletic Commission. Bob, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much, Joe. I appreciate you having me on.
Great. It's always a pleasure having Bob on the show because Bob brings so much information in reference to his duties as an Executive Director with the Athletic Commission. I know, Bob, you came on to the commission close to coming up on 4 years now as the Executive Director. But prior to that, this guy was an FBI agent for 24 years. And prior to that, he was a Marine. He was a captain in the Marines. So the man comes with a lot of great credentials behind him to make sure that Nevada boxing and MMA, combat sports, is run the way it's supposed to be run by a good individual like yourself. Can you tell us a little bit about your duties as an Executive Director?
I'd be happy to, Joe. I'm basically responsible for the day-to-day operations, and that would be from selecting the officials to ensuring all the medicals are covered, making sure we touch base with the ringside physicians, judges, and make sure, first and foremost, make sure I'm working and looking out for the health and safety of the fighters.
Now, we know that you don't run the commission all by yourself. You have a nice staff of individuals, and on top of that, you have your 5 commissioners that oversee your duties of the whole operation.
That's correct. I work at the pleasure of the chairman, Anthony Marnell III, and 4 other commissioners. Fortunately for me, they're macro managers, and they give me quite a bit of autonomy, but I always make sure that I keep them informed on the decisions that we make in our best effort to look out for the fighter.
Now, you came onto the commission, and you came on after Keith Kaiser was the executive director prior to you, and prior to him was Mark Ratner. Now, to fill the position of these 2 individuals, especially Mark Ratner, who really was from way back when he was an inspector and worked his way through to become executive director, and he's always been a fellow that kind of micromanaged all the assignments of the officials, along with the sanctioning body, with the promoters, managers. Can you walk us how the procedure is handled today when it comes to assigning officials, judges, and doctors?
Okay, well, when you're looking at whether it be an undercard fight, a 4-round card, or a championship fight, it's incumbent upon us to put the very best officials, the most capable officials on that fight, so that fighter has the best chance of winning. Our goal, obviously, is to make sure that the fighter that won the fight, the scorecards reflect that. Sometimes, it'll be a very close competitive fight. You may have a majority draw, you may have a split, but by and large, we look for unanimous decisions in the event a fighter doesn't have a TKO or a KO.
Now, a lot of fans want to know also is how many shows do we have here in the state of Nevada, whether it's boxing or MMA combined? How many shows do you have a year?
Oh, I would say, off the top of my head, maybe 50.
50 shows. Now, out of those 50 shows, we have just a handful of mega fights like the Canelo Alvarez and Gennady Golovkin coming on September 15th. How many you would say roughly about 4 or 5 mega fights a year?
Oh, yes. Easily, to include the UFC.
The UFC, yeah.
UFC, we do anywhere between 4 and 8 mega fights, and boxing, we're usually around 5 for mega fights.
Okay, now here at the T-Mobile Arena, we know that's a big arena, like one of the biggest here that we've ever had in Nevada, and now we have the main event coming up, Gennady Golovkin, Canelo Alvarez. The atmosphere for that type of fight that we did last year was really unbelievable. Now you have that fight coming up September 15th. How do you assign the officials for that particular fight?
Well, quite frankly, I've already started evaluating what fighters, what are the championship fights, and talking with Tom Loeffler, Triple G's manager, as well as Eric Gomez from Golden Boy Promotions. So it looks like they're going to have 4 championship fights. So obviously with 4 championship fights, we need at least about 16 A-plus judges. Mm-hmm. And what I do is I go and look at the judges that have consistently been successful under pressure and are used to working in the fight capital of the world.
Okay, now as far as the referees?
And referees, we do the exact same thing. We see who's been here before, and really what we try to do is we try to groom the officials on smaller fights or lower end fights before the mega fights come on, such as the T-Mobile. You know, there'll be 18,000 people there, 18,000 fans screaming, and you really have to be focused, calm, cool, and collective. And you know, it's all in the effort of making sure that the right fighter wins, and we look out for the health and safety of the fighter.
Right. Talking about 18,000 fans, I remember doing a fight, being under pressure. I refereed Julio Cesar Chavez and Greg Hagen with 136,000 fans in Mexico City. And another Chavez fight, I refereed Chavez and Whitaker at the Alamo Dome in Texas, 65,000 fans. I mean, you have to be under the pressure. The thing is that with referees and judges, the judges are in the hot seat, as we know. They're in the hot seat, and you know, of course, every second, if they take the focus just 2 seconds of the concentration, that scorecard can shift the other way that easily. So I call it the hot seat for the judges. And of course the referees as well, because the referee has two fighters' lives in his hands. And the first and foremost, as being an ex-referee myself, I can tell you that safety is first and foremost. And of course the second most important job is to enforce the rules. But you as a commissioner, I know you look at every single angle of all the judges, the scoring, the referees. We have seminars, and you know, which I'm involved with, helping out with the officials as well, to make sure that we're all on the same page. We got the judges, referees, but you know, me as a referee, I love working with my colleagues while I was active, and even now when I'm not active as an inside the ring official. But I'm always on the side trying to help and talk to my colleagues. And they're like brothers to me. We're a near little family, the referees, and I'm glad to see the way you've been handling the duties and making sure that those teams stay together and focus before the fights. Now, I know that you have little warm-up sessions with the referees and the judges prior to the fights. Tell the fans, why is it that you do this?
Well, what we like to do before a fight is just like any type of, you know, operation where it's a team effort. We like to initially have a briefing. So I'll get with the referees that are working the fight. We'll go over the card. They'll know what their assignments are. And if there's any little idiosyncrasies or any concerns I may have with the fighters, I bring that to the attention of the referees, because immediately upon the fight starting, they get a skill assessment of the fighter. And then we do something that's we've been doing for almost 4 years now, is that we bring the judges together and we go around the horn. And basically what that is, we start to, with either side of me, and everybody that's judging the fight that night, they have to contribute and state something that would be productive for the other judges to recall once the fight gets started. So really, it's an effort to really get them in the mindset of and get feedback from everybody else on what we're looking at, what we're concentrating on tonight. Focus is second to none. You know, relax, let the fight come to you, and then after we go through the briefing, each judge has enough time to go off by themselves or whatever their standard operational procedure is to be prepared before the fight. They do. So I make sure they have ample time to do that, but we want to make sure collectively as a group we're on the same sheet of music before the fight starts.
Great. Now, talking about being an official, how they perform, whatnot, you are an official yourself. You started in the amateur ranks, and then you went into the pro ranks. Can you walk us through? A lot of fans out there want to know, how do you become a judge or a referee? Can you walk us through how you went through the process? Can you tell us how that happened?
I'd be happy to. It's quite honestly, it's a bit of an anomaly, because I just wanted to give back to the community, and based on my job and how much time I had available, the only thing I really could do would be an amateur judge for boxing. So I was an amateur judge in boxing for like 10 years.
Right.
And I had no aspirations of becoming a professional judge, let alone the executive director of the Nevada State Athletic Commission. So after years of being an amateur judge, somebody mentioned it to me. And I said, yeah, I'd be interested. So for 2 years, I was a shadow judge. And I watched all the fights I could for 2 years. I scored the fights, and I gave my scorecard to the executive director. And then at the end of 2 years, he decided to bring me on board. So I would say that anybody that's looking to become a judge out there, obviously your first and foremost interest has to be for the fighter. This is not about the judges, it's all about the fighters. And it behooves most people, most judges, to have an amateur background. And if they don't, they've been proven in other areas that they can concentrate, stay focused, and are familiar with unarmed combat, whether it's boxing or mixed martial arts.
Exactly. Now, that in boxing, we have to always be focused 100% because we know we're in the hot seat as a referee or as a judge. But as a referee, I can tell you that being in that ring with two great fighters, whether it's four-rounders or championship-level fighters, there's two lives in their hands. And we as referees, we always concentrate and focus on the fighters. But we also, what I did before a fight, I will always study these fighters' background, their history, or I would talk with the ringside doctor or with the commission to see if there's something I might have missed to make sure nobody falls through the crack, but make sure that these fighters, when I go into that dressing room to give them the instruction, because that's where the referee takes control, back in the dressing room.
Right.
You take control back there, it makes the fight easier for you in the ring. And the referees have to know that being the most important person in that ring as far as an official, because you have to make sure these fighters, listen to your commands, and you give them good, loud verbal commands. They know that you're a no-nonsense referee, but you're there to protect them. Like I used to tell Mike Tyson many times. I refereed him 9 times throughout his starting of his career, including his last fight. And I would tell Mike, we know that you're a great fighter, you're the best man on this planet, but remember one thing, I'm here to protect you. But that's first and foremost. And second is to enforce the rules. I want a good, clean fight. And talking about clean fight, sometimes you start to think about what happened when he bit Holyfield's ear.
Right.
That's why when I used to give him the instruction, I used to cover my ears just to make sure that he didn't go wild on me. But Mike Tyson's a beautiful man, and he learned a lot from his experiences. And sometimes, we have to control ourselves. Sometimes we get angry, and we can't make those mistakes because sometimes those mistakes can come back to haunt you someday, which has for Mike Tyson. But if you know Mike Tyson the way I do, I can tell you the man is a good man. He loves his family. He's a caring guy. But sometimes when he was fighting, he would lose his temper. And that's where in boxing, we always try to teach officials, even myself, when I was a fighter, an amateur and professional, I was taught to have the discipline and the confidence level and the self-esteem, but especially the discipline of listening and not losing control. Because when you lose control, whether it's in the ring or outside the ring, you're going to lose. Right. That's why I tell people in the real world, keep your guards up at all times, protect yourselves at all times, because you don't know what's coming your way. But you got to be ready, cool, calm, and collective, and handle matters in a professional manner so that you don't lose the battle, whether, like I said before, in the ring, outside the ring. We know that, Bobby, what can you tell us about that?
Well, right along those lines, it's very similar for a judge. Once a judge takes his seat or her seat, and they get in a frame of mind that they're ready to get focused and stay relaxed. Mm-hmm. And we always talk about let the fight come to you. Both fighters have a big 10 on the top of their head as we visualize the fight starting. And then one fighter gets off to a better start, boom, he's up 10-9, or she's up 10-9. Mm. And, if you're really focused and you're really following the fighters, you almost feel like you're in the fight, and you really don't hear the crowd. And you're looking at where is the scoring zone, because you could have fighter A throwing multiple punches, but they're not in the scoring zone. So that judge has to really relax, take a deep breath, not get caught up in the emotions, and look, where are those punches landing? And if they're not in the scoring zone, like, world-class, Judge Dave Moretti very calmly puts it, hey, he threw a lot of punches, but they weren't in the scoring zone. Right. So, the judges, very similar to, in one sense, to the referees, they're very focused, and they have to be.
They have to be because, we know, like you said, the 4 criteria in scoring a round, people say, well, how is it that a judge, does he count every punch in his head? No, of course you can't count every punch in your head, but you have to look at the effective aggressiveness, the cleaner blows, defense, and that's what you're talking about, punches that are being thrown, but he got good defense, so he gets credit for defense. And of course, the ring generalship. So you look at those 4 criteria, and that's how you evaluate a fight to make it easier for a referee. So if you're a fan of boxing, you watch and you see a guy getting hit with some hard, good punches, he may get hit with 2 solid punches that may wobble, and he gets all wobbled up, and he would just throw a couple of light jabs at the other guy. Well, that's easy. And that's an easy round to score. You know, the guy who got wobbled a couple of times in that round, obviously he's going to lose that round. But it's a back and forth type of a thing. They can both be hurting each other with hot blows. Nobody getting hurt, but hot punches are being landed. Now you have to determine, okay, well, who had the best defense in there, who had the best ring generalship, you know. And just things like that, that's how you kind of score a fight. I used to score fights at the beginning of my 35 years as a referee. The first 10 years, I was a referee and a judge. They had two judges in the outside, and the referee was the third judge and referee. So I learned how to evaluate fighters and who was scoring the best and with better defense, better ring generalship.
And you know what, Joe, to add to that, just for the fans' sake, most of the fans do not realize, they may understand how to score a fight. Clean, effective blows, of course, are the number one criteria. But secondly, that judge has to pay attention for every second of every minute for those 3 minutes of that round. And then at the end of that round, they even should take a look at the fighter and see how he or she's walking back to the corner. Mm-hmm. And a lot of folks at home that are fans or at the arena, they're watching the fight, they have an idea how to score it, but if you take your eye off that fight for 5 seconds, you may have missed two effective punches that really gave that round to one of the two fighters.
Absolutely, that's where we talk about concentration and making sure that you're paying. Don't go with a local fighter or who's a favorite fighter. You're looking at fighter A, fighter B. And that's what and no matter if this fighter A has won the first 5 rounds, just because the 6th round's a little closer, but he's still not win the round. Don't give it to him just because he didn't win the first 5 rounds. Every round is a beginning. It's like if he just started. Don't look back, and don't even try to say, well, I think he's gonna get knocked out. All that your mind got to be neutral at all time. Both fighters, when that bell rings, it can have that you in your mind saying, well, I like this particular fighter over that one. I like a slugger over a boxer or a boxer over a slugger. If you're going that route, you're not doing your job as a referee. You got to be neutral at all times. When the bell rings, both fighters come out at the same time. One cannot be ahead. If you start making predictions, I told judges or referees, if you start making predictions before the fight, the bell rings, one fighter's already ahead. It's not fair. So that's what takes a lot of training, all these seminars that you give for judges and referees to keep them up to date and refresh your courses, which is so important.
Right, it is. It's training second to none. We like to train as often as we can. And of course, many of our officials go to the various sanctioning bodies when they have their annual meetings, and they attend training sessions as well. But if you want to take a look at a judge, as I do, and follow that judge's history, you can go and look at records from Fight Facts, Box Rec, and I even keep something from Pod Index. And it basically tells you how many times, if you are intimately familiar with the judges, how many times that judge was in the majority, and how many times the majority ended up being the right fighter to win. So you basically have a dossier on each judge to see who has consistently performed under pressure, and then you take a look at those, and then you add a couple of people from out of state, out of country, and it gives you a very professional number of judges that come from various backgrounds but have all proven to be successful.
Well, I tell you, you fans out there, that when I first got invited to come to Las Vegas back in 1991, as a judge, they brought me out as a judge from New York, to judge the Michael Spinks and Larry Holmes fight, the rematch. And I was by myself. The other two judges favored Michael Spinks, and I favored Larry Holmes. And I said, wow, it's my first time out here, and I'm by myself. So on paper, it looks like maybe I kind of was not the right judge for that fight. It was just the opposite. Everybody felt that it was the other two judges who were not correct, and I was the one who was correct in that fight. And I thought, well, my God, the first time I come to Las Vegas, they invite me. Did I screw up? Well, that was the beginning of my welcoming to Nevada to be a judge.
You bring up an excellent point, and that's why before I said it's very important for the executive director to be intimately familiar with the officials, as we're speaking right now, about the judges. Because if over a period of time, a pattern develops, just like in anything else. And that pattern will tell you who is performing successfully through Pod Index or Fight Facts or Box Rec. And from there, obviously everybody's going to have a bad day. There's no one in any profession in this world that doesn't have a bad day. And hopefully you don't have it on a major or even on the undercard. But so you try to select your judges that in such a way, if one judge has an off night, the other two judges will ensure that the right fighter won. It always doesn't work, as we've seen in the past, but for the most part, my 4 years in this position, we've been successful for the most part.
Yeah, no question about it. And I know that boxing means the world to you, and MMA as well. Now, you got thrown into a position where back in the old days, Mark Ratton and Keith Kaiser came in, there was only boxing. Then all of a sudden, MMA came about, and now they got thrown with a double duties. Now you guys have to really like one side of your team is with boxing, the other side with MMA. I mean, it's kind of hard, I would say, to kind of shuffle that around. Isn't that a little difficult?
We have it's not too difficult. It's interesting if you really want to do your homework and you're involved in unarmed combat. But the UFC, not to show any prejudice or bias towards any other MMA groups, but we primarily do most of our mixed martial arts with the UFC. Mm-hmm. They have a phenomenal business plan that puts the best fighters against one another. Right. They had a show in New York, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago or so, where 3 championship fighters got upset, okay, and they lost, and belt got transferred to someone else. So they have 2 matchmakers for the UFC. They submit their opponents to us to approve the fight, and it's not unusual to see half their card, 3/4 of their card being upset because they put the best against the best. So in that way, it makes my job a lot easier because you can see the turnout on the front end of the fight. Half the arena is filled in a UFC fight, or after 4 cards, after 4 fights, it's almost full.
Right. Now, I know that in boxing, sometimes some of the fans say, we want to see certain fighters fight the best out there. And I know most recently you had to turn down a fighter by the name of Jaime Munguia from Mexico who was trying to fight. Well, actually, the Triple G team wanted him to fight for the championship because the Canelo Alvarez fight got canceled in May, Cinco de Mayo. And so, of course, you as the commissioner, you tried to make the best for the fighters and for the fans, but you said no to Munguia, and everybody got upset. And Triple G ended up fighting in California with somebody else.
Martirosyan.
Yeah, but now Munguia, because you said no, walk us through what happened after that.
Well, it was a very interesting event because it was going to be Cinco de Mayo, okay, and they wanted Jaime Munguia, a young upcoming fighter, to fight against Triple G, who's been in the business for years, whose record was I don't have it with me right now, but something like 30-0-1, one draw with Marquez, Canelo, excuse me, and Jaime had an excellent record. He was like 29-0 with like 28 knockouts or something like that. But unfortunately, I mean, he looked good. It looked like he's going to be a rising star. He's 6 foot. He's fighting junior middleweight.
21 years of age.
21, and he had never seen the likes of some of the competition that Triple G has,
right,
that Gennady Golovkin had. And by looking at his fight facts and the box records, there is competition, with all due respect to all those fighters, because anybody that gets into the rings, you have to give him a lot of credit. But his competition really paled in comparison to Triple G. So there were a lot of people, I don't want to get into the specifics, that were pressing that for that fight to happen here. But we knew it wasn't in the best interest of the fighter. And for us, it would have been fairly lucrative. But fortunately, I have Chairman Anthony Marnell III, that when I get in positions like that, he's always available. I bounce my thoughts off of him. He provides me feedback, and he says, hey, number 1 priority, health and safety of the fighter. Right. So we passed on Munguia.
Right, so now we passed on Munguia, everything was a blessing in disguise, because what happened next?
Right. Munguia goes back and he fights Ali Saddam.
Saddam Ali.
And Ali is really a welterweight at 147, but when he beat Cotto, he fought at 154. He weighed in at 152. Yeah. So now all of a sudden, they wanted him to fight Ali because he beat Cotto. They wanted him to fight Jaime. So, of course, Jaime took the fight. And when it came time to fight night, I think it was like 170 pounds. Yeah. And the kid's 6'1". 6 foot, 6'1". So he's a little bit above a super middleweight.
Yeah, good heavy puncher.
And, he threw so many punches so hard at Ali, who's really a welterweight. There's 3 different divisions there, 3 different weight classes, excuse me. And he subsequently became the world champ.
Yeah, he knocked out Saddam Ali, and now he's a world champion. Now, had you let him fight here in Vegas, the chances are probably 100 to 1 that he would have gotten knocked out by Triple G, because Triple G is a solid middleweight, probably pound for pound, one of the top 3 in the world right now. So here he is, and now you refuse him here in Las Vegas. He fights in New York, knocks out Saddam Ali. Now he's a super welterweight champion of the world, right. And now he's fighting again in Nevada.
Liam Smith.
And here we are. He stopped Leon Smith and defended his title in a great fight. It was a nice fight, probably one of the best fights of the year so far.
Right.
It was that kind of a fight. And thanks to Bob Bennett and the commission, who said, no, you cannot fight here until you prove yourself.
And it really worked out for him.
Yeah.
And I had the opportunity to speak to Jaime and his camp,
right, just
to inform them out of professional courtesy of why that fight wasn't approvable. And I'm glad it worked out in his behalf.
Right. So here he is now. He's fighting again in Nevada in the very near future.
And he could possibly be on one of the championship cards on September 15th. We're waiting to hear.
Yeah, that's not confirmed yet.
Not yet. Not at this time.
Well,
but I know they're looking for him.
Yeah.
They're considering him.
Well, I'll tell you, we like what you're doing. We're very proud of your performance as an executive director. And Anthony Monell III, he's a great commissioner, doing the right things for boxing, along with the other commissioners. And being that boxing is one of the highly watched sporting events in any sport, especially here, the boxing capital of the world, I can say that Nevada should be very proud of the way the commission is being run by your team. And, of course, your staff. You have a great staff. You have some of the employees been there 25, 30 years, Colleen and Barbara and the rest of the individuals at the office. They're all doing a great job. And, I think without them, it'll be very difficult. But they run a nice, tight ship under your supervision.
You couldn't be more correct, Joe. It's a team effort. And if the fans ever got an opportunity to see what the staff does in the office,
right,
the fight would never come to fruition without the staff that we have, the inspectors. Our ringside physicians have been in the business 20, 30 years. We have all types of medical services available. If a fight should turn upside down, we're prepared for the unthinkable. And it's only because it's a collective effort between the referees, the judges, the ringside physicians, inspectors, and my staff. So it's, I'm fortunate because I have a plethora of experience that I'm working with.
Yeah, well, we're very happy to have you on our show today. Give the fans out there a little bit about what goes on behind the scenes with the Nevada State Athletic Commission, with Bob Bennett, Executive Director, Joe Cortez. We'll see you next week. Take care. Thank you, Bob.
Thanks a lot. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure.